Does Chilean wine terrify you? If so, that's a weird thing to be scared of. It's Pocket Wine School. Hi, I'm Tommy with Pocket Wine School, the channel where we learn wine by cutting through the myths, jargon, and pseudoscience. Right now we're talking about the wines of Chile and why they are a perfect antidote to sobriety. And a quick note, I've just launched a totally free course on French wine regions, so click on the link in the description below to get it. But for right now, we ain't talking about France, so let's get this Chile cooking. Despite its recent appearance on the global scene, Chile is actually no stranger to wine, much like that woman Hannah who just joined your book club. Winemaking in Chile began in 1554 when Spanish conquistadors brought the European Vitis vinifera vine, along with smallpox and measles, to the South American continent. As with most regions at this time, the wines were largely being produced for Mass and Communion, and the Spanish, being good conquering Catholics, were no exception. They found the climate and geography of Chile ideally suited for grape growing, and they brought the technology for winemaking. Yet even though it was the Spanish who did the colonizing and the wine teaching and the preparation, Chilean wine was and remains much more influenced by the French, in particular Bordeaux. It's like if Spain brought Chile to the prom only to watch it leave with France after hooking up in the teacher's lounge. For most of Chile's history, the wine was fermented and aged in casks made of beechwood. The flavors added by beechwood aging are not favorable for wine and in fact are only barely suitable for Budweiser. Consequently, one of the many European winemaking innovations brought over by French investors was oak aging and stainless steel fermenting, though this didn't really happen until the late 20th century. In fact, for most of Chile's winemaking history, it was only known for two things: sweet wine and a beverage called pisco. Pisco is a yellow brandy made from distilled muscat and other grapes. Surprisingly, the name is not an abbreviation of piss-colored, though that would technically be accurate. Instead, it probably takes its name from the Peruvian port of Pisco, located in the valley of Pisco, which was formed by the river Pisco, a word I will stop saying lest I invoke the great bladder demon. And on the topic of valleys, it must be stated that Chile is full of them. Valleys are ideal for winemaking, as has been shown in the valleys of Napa, Rhone, Loire, and of course, the Hidden Valley. In many cases, these valleys are made up of smaller valleys, which also contain even smaller valleys, stopping only at the subatomic level, probably. So let's talk about these fascinating winemaking valleys. Chile, you'll remember from the globe in your garage, is in the southern hemisphere. Consequently, the northern sections are warmer than the southern sections, which are closer to the South Pole. The country is long and thin and is bordered by the Pacific to the west and the Andes Mountains to the east. The Pacific helps to cool down the warmer parts due to the Humboldt Current. And though this sounds like a British power company, it's actually a very cold ocean current that helps to moderate Chile's often quite warm vintages. Cool air coming down from the Andes Mountains also helps keep the nighttime temperatures low. Cool nights help the grapes preserve their acidity. Without that acidity, the wines can be unbalanced to the point of flabbiness. The Atacama Valley in the north grows tons of grapes. However, most grapes grown in the north are either table grapes, meaning grapes to be eaten, or grapes to be fermented and distilled into pisco brandy. This is also the case for the Coquimbo Valley below it, although the subregion of Limari has a climate similar to Marlborough, New Zealand, and produces excellent Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Sauvignon Blanc. Aconcagua comprises three valleys that are all superstars on the Chilean scene. The Casablanca Valley, which produces delicious Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and Pinot Noir. The up-and-coming San Antonio Valley, which also excels at those three grapes. And finally, the Aconcagua Valley itself, which managed to produce not one, but two wines that beat Bordeaux in a blind tasting at the 2004 Berlin Wine Tasting. The big dog here was the 2001 Senior Red Blend, which you can still buy for around 170 bucks. You may be able to find that amount of money in your couch cushions. If not, consider checking someone else's couch cushions. Moving further south, we come to the Central Valley. This is probably the sweet spot of Chilean wine, and it's certainly where most of it is produced. In fact, about a quarter of all Chilean wine is produced right here in the Rapel Valley. The Rapel Valley is within the Maipo Valley, and the trend here is toward Cabernet Sauvignon with a hint of mintiness to the mix, similar to the cabs of Australia's Coonawarra region. If that sounds weird to you, you gotta try it. The rappel also breaks down into two other valleys, the warmer Cachapoal and the cooler Mediterranean Colchagua, which is probably Chile's most famous wine-producing region. This is where Carmenere shines. If you're not familiar with Carmenere, it's one of several Bordeaux grapes which found greater expression outside of France, sort of a reverse Jerry Lewis. It's a crossing of Cabernet Sauvignon and Trousseau, is cousins with Merlot and Malbec, and is tied with Syrah for most frequently mispronounced grape. It's Carmenere, not Carmenere. If you say nye and you're not a cartoon Russian, you're saying it wrong. So those are the regions. But what are the wines like? For a long time, Chile made a ton of Merlot and Sauvignon Blanc. And yet, to a lot of wine tasters, these didn't taste right. Was it the terroir? Was it the hemisphere? Was it some sort of microwave radiation transmitted from alien satellites? It turns out that the Merlot was Carmenere and the Sauvignon Blanc was Sauvignon Vert. Carmenere I just discussed. Remember that bit about the cartoon Russians? Classic. But Sauvignon Vert, you may not know. It's a crossing of the two white Bordeaux heavy hitters, Sauvignon Blanc and its sibling, Semillon. I know, gross. But while the Sauvignon Vert has given way to true Sauvignon Blanc, Carmenere is here to stay. It's big and bold with roasted red pepper notes that sometimes take on an almost curry-like aroma. But the flavors are all black fruit and it is delicious. Other places grow Carmenere, but nobody does it like Chile. For anyone who is really into organic and biodynamic farming, Chile has your number and promises to call as soon as it has a chance. The geography here is quite unusual, as most of the winemaking country is well protected by natural borders, notably the Pacific and the Andes. The Andes form a rain shadow, meaning the country is very, very dry. The cool Humboldt Current also helps to relieve humidity. So while this means that irrigation is an absolute necessity, it also means that there is very little disease pressure. This makes conditions ideal for organic farming. As a side note, Chile has also managed to remain free of the famous Phylloxera pest. If you aren't familiar with Phylloxera, that's the subject for an upcoming video. Suffice it to say that it's like a nasty case of lice, but for wine grapes. And if you thought getting sent home from school was bad, just know that Phylloxera nearly destroyed every grapevine in Europe in the 19th century. The solution was to graft the old vines onto new roots. But with Chile, it's all original roots, baby. As with any wine recommendation I make, I think it's more important to focus on the grape, region, and price point rather than any particular brand. First, find an inexpensive Carmenere from the Colchagua Valley and try to spend under $22 on it. Don't worry about finding a Reserva or Gran Reserva if you don't see one. Like in much of the New World, these terms aren't so tightly regulated as they are in Europe. Next, find an inexpensive Sauvignon Blanc from Le Maire. It should be easy to keep it under $15. Finally, you should try a Cabernet Sauvignon from the Maipo Valley just to get a sense of those minty notes. If you discover that you like any or all of these, you're in luck. As recently as 2018, there were over 12,000 registered winemaking properties in Chile. Start now, and maybe you can drink them all.